I refused to attend my brother's graduation after he invited my ex, but excluded my husband, and now my family is livid. They're blaming me for causing chaos, but it was a clear betrayal from me. So, I started planning my silent revenge. I, 28M, never thought my own brother would stab me in the back like this, but here we are. The graduation invitation arrived 3 weeks ago, and when I opened it, my blood ran cold. There it was, in black and white, my ex-girlfriend's name printed neatly on the guest list, while my husband of 2 years was nowhere to be found. My brother was graduating from law school, something our entire family had been anticipating for years. He'd struggled through undergrad, barely scraped by, and this degree represented his redemption arc. Everyone was supposed to be there: parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone except the person who mattered most to me. When I called him to ask about the obvious oversight, his response made everything crystal clear. He told me that my husband made him uncomfortable, that this was his special day, and he wanted to keep things traditional. Then came the kicker. He'd invited my ex because she'd been supportive during his difficult times in college, and he considered her family. The audacity hit me like a freight train. My ex, who I'd dated for 6 months 3 years ago, was considered family. My husband, who I'd been with for 4 years and married for 2, was apparently too uncomfortable to include. The homophobia wasn't even subtle anymore. I told him I wouldn't be attending without my husband. He laughed and said I was being dramatic, that I could bring him to the dinner afterward if it meant that much to me. As if my marriage was some consolation prize worthy of the kiddie table. My parents called within hours. They were furious with me for threatening to miss such an important family milestone over what they called a minor issue. My mother kept saying I was being selfish, that this wasn't about me, and that I needed to think about what was best for the family. My father was more direct. He told me to stop making everything about my lifestyle and just show up like a normal person. The irony wasn't lost on me. They wanted me to act normal while treating my marriage as abnormal. My sister tried to play mediator, suggesting I could attend alone just this once to keep the peace. She meant well, but she didn't understand that this wasn't about one event. This was about my family's complete inability to accept my husband as part of their lives. This was about them being perfectly comfortable with my ex, a woman I barely spoke to anymore, but drawing the line at the man I'd chosen to spend my life with. I made my decision. I wouldn't attend the graduation, but I also wouldn't just disappear quietly into the background while they celebrated their perfect traditional family moment. The plan started forming slowly. My brother had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong despite his numerous failures and questionable choices. He dropped out of college twice, had a brief stint with gambling that nearly bankrupted him, and had been bailed out by our parents more times than I could count. Yet somehow, he was still the family success story while I, with my stable career, healthy marriage, and actual accomplishments, was the disappointment. I started with social media. My brother had been posting constantly about his upcoming graduation, sharing every milestone and achievement. I began commenting on these posts with seemingly supportive messages that contained subtle digs. When he posted about his internship at a prestigious firm, I congratulated him and mentioned how proud I was that he'd finally found his calling after so many false starts. When he shared photos from his graduation photo shoot, I commented about how great it was to see him looking so professional and mature. To outsiders, I looked like the supportive older brother. To anyone who knew our family history, the comments were loaded with implications about his past failures. Next, I reached out to extended family members who wouldn't be attending the graduation. I didn't badmouth my brother directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I shared how disappointed I was that I couldn't attend because my husband wasn't welcome, and how difficult it was to navigate family events when not everyone felt included. I let them draw their own conclusions about what kind of person would exclude a family member's spouse while inviting an ex-girlfriend. The response was immediate. My aunt called my mother to ask why my husband wasn't invited. My cousin posted on social media about the importance of accepting all family members regardless of who they love. My grandmother, bless her heart, called my brother directly to ask why he was being mean to his brother's husband. My brother started getting questions he couldn't answer without revealing his true motivations. He couldn't say my husband made him uncomfortable without admitting to homophobia. He couldn't explain why my ex was more welcome than my spouse without sounding petty and vindictive. But I wasn't done. I knew my brother's weak spots, and I knew exactly how to exploit them without leaving fingerprints. He'd been dating someone new for about 6 months, a woman he was clearly smitten with. She seemed nice enough, progressive in her thinking, and had been posting supportive content about LGBTQ+ rights on her social media. I wondered if she knew about her boyfriend's stance on his brother's marriage. I didn't contact her directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I made sure she saw the family drama unfolding. I posted a heartfelt message on my social media about the challenges of having family members who struggle to accept your marriage and how painful it is when the people you love make you choose between your spouse and your family. I tagged several family members who I knew were connected to her, ensuring it would show up in her feed. The post gained traction. Friends and extended family members shared it, commented with support, and expressed their disappointment in unnamed family members who would put someone in such a position. My brother's girlfriend saw it, along with all the supportive comments calling out homophobic family members. She started asking him questions. I know this because my sister mentioned that he seemed stressed about something his girlfriend had brought up. He couldn't explain his position without revealing himself to be exactly the kind of person his progressive girlfriend would never want to date. Meanwhile, the graduation was approaching, and the family drama was escalating. My parents were getting calls from relatives asking about the situation. Some were taking my side, others were trying to stay neutral, but everyone was talking about it. What should have been a celebration of my brother's achievement was becoming a referendum on family values and acceptance. My brother tried to do damage control. He called me with what he probably thought was a compromise. He said my husband could come to the graduation ceremony, but asked that we sit separately from the family and not attend the dinner afterward. He framed it as meeting me halfway, but it was actually worse than his original position. He wanted my husband there as a prop to make himself look better while still treating him as a second-class family member. I declined his generous offer and told him I hoped he had a wonderful day with his chosen family, including my ex-girlfriend. The week before graduation, things reached a breaking point. My brother's girlfriend had apparently done some digging and found out about the guest list situation. She confronted him about excluding his brother's husband while inviting an ex-girlfriend, and according to my sister, it didn't go well. She told him she needed to think about whether she wanted to be with someone who would treat family that way. My parents were now dealing with the possibility that their son's relationship might implode right before his big day. They called me, angrier than I'd ever heard them, accusing me of sabotaging my brother's happiness and ruining his graduation. They said I was being vindictive and cruel, that I was destroying the family over my need to make everything about myself. I listened to their accusations calmly and then asked them a simple question. If they thought I was being unreasonable, why were so many other family members supporting my position? Why was my brother's own girlfriend questioning his choices? Maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't my reaction to being excluded. Maybe the problem was the exclusion itself. They hung up on me. Update 1. Graduation day arrived, and I spent it exactly as I'd planned, at home with my husband, enjoying a peaceful Saturday together. We went for a hike, had lunch at our favorite restaurant, and spent the evening watching movies. It was infinitely better than sitting through a ceremony where I wasn't truly welcome. The aftermath, however, was more dramatic than I'd anticipated. My brother's girlfriend didn't attend the graduation. She'd apparently decided she needed space to think about their relationship, and his big day became a very public reminder of the consequences of his choices. My ex-girlfriend did attend, which created its own awkwardness since she barely knew anyone there, and had to explain to curious relatives why she was present when the graduate's brother was not. The family dinner was reportedly tense. Extended family members who had heard about the situation kept asking where I was, and my parents had to repeatedly explain my absence. Several relatives left early, saying they didn't feel comfortable celebrating when part of the family had been excluded. My sister called me that evening to fill me in on the details. She said my brother looked miserable throughout the entire day, that our parents were barely speaking to each other because they disagreed on how to handle the situation, and that the celebration felt more like a wake than a party. She also mentioned that my brother had been trying to reach his girlfriend all day, but she wasn't responding to his calls or messages. The relationship that had been going so well was now hanging by a thread, and everyone knew why. But the real bombshell came 3 days later. Update 2. My brother's girlfriend didn't just need space, she was done. She broke up with him over text, telling him she couldn't be with someone who would treat family members with such cruelty and prejudice. She said his actions toward me and my husband revealed a side of his character that she found incompatible with her values. My brother was devastated. He'd been planning to introduce her to extended family at the graduation, possibly even announce their engagement soon. Instead, he was single and facing the reality that his homophobia had cost him the woman he loved. He tried to blame me for the breakup, calling me to scream about how I'd ruined his life and destroyed his relationship. He said I was vindictive and manipulative, that I'd orchestrated the whole thing to hurt him. He wasn't wrong about the orchestration part, but he was missing the bigger picture. I let him vent for a while, then calmly explained that I hadn't forced him to exclude my husband. I hadn't made him invite my ex-girlfriend. I hadn't made him reveal his true character to someone whose opinion mattered to him. All I'd done was refuse to enable his behavior by pretending it was acceptable. He hung up on me, but I wasn't finished with him yet. The next phase of my plan was already in motion. My brother had been offered a position at the law firm where he'd interned, contingent on passing the bar exam and completing a background check. It was his dream job, the culmination of everything he'd worked toward. I knew the managing partner at the firm through professional connections. We'd worked on a project together 2 years earlier. I didn't reach out to him directly about my brother, but I did make sure he was aware of my family situation through mutual contacts. I posted about the challenges of workplace discrimination and the importance of inclusive company cultures, tagging colleagues who were connected to his firm. The legal profession, especially at prestigious firms, is increasingly focused on diversity and inclusion. They can't afford to have employees whose personal beliefs might create liability or public relations problems. When my brother's potential employer started hearing whispers about his treatment of his gay brother, they began asking questions. The background check process suddenly became more thorough. They started calling references who hadn't been contacted before, asking specific questions about his character and his ability to work with diverse colleagues and clients. Word got back to my brother that there were concerns about his fitness for the position. He was panicking. This job was everything to him. The salary, the prestige, the validation that he'd finally made something of himself. The possibility of losing it because of his treatment of me was eating him alive. Update 3. My brother came to my house unannounced on a Tuesday evening, looking haggard and desperate. He stood on my doorstep, shifting nervously from foot to foot, and asked if we could talk. My husband offered to give us privacy, but I asked him to stay. Whatever my brother had to say, my husband deserved to hear it too. My brother apologized. Not the half-hearted, conditional apology I'd expected, but a real acknowledgement of what he'd done wrong. He admitted that he'd been uncomfortable with my sexuality for years, that he'd never really accepted my marriage, and that inviting my ex while excluding my husband was cruel and inexcusable. He talked about how losing his girlfriend had forced him to confront his own prejudices, how the potential loss of his job had made him realize that his beliefs had real consequences beyond just family drama. He said he'd been seeing a therapist to work through his issues and that he wanted to make things right. It was exactly what I'd wanted to hear for years, but it felt hollow coming only after he'd lost everything. I wondered if he was truly sorry or just sorry that his bigotry had finally cost him something he cared about. I told him I appreciated his apology, but that words weren't enough anymore. If he wanted to rebuild our relationship, he needed to prove that his change was genuine. I laid out my conditions. He would publicly apologize to my husband. He would tell our parents that his treatment of us had been wrong and demand that they accept my marriage fully, and he would use his position as a lawyer to advocate for LGBTQ+ rights. He agreed to everything without hesitation. The desperation in his eyes told me he would have agreed to almost anything to undo the damage he'd caused to his own life. Over the following weeks, my brother followed through on his promises. He posted a public apology on social media, acknowledging his homophobic behavior and expressing his commitment to doing better. He had difficult conversations with our parents, forcing them to confront their own prejudices and demanding that they treat my husband as a full member of the family. The changes weren't just performative. He started volunteering with LGBTQ+ legal advocacy groups, using his new law degree to help people facing discrimination. He enrolled in sensitivity training and began educating himself about issues he'd never bothered to understand before. His efforts helped repair some of the damage to his reputation, and he eventually got the job at the law firm, though he had to start in a less prestigious position than originally offered. His ex-girlfriend didn't take him back, but he seemed to accept that as a consequence of his choices. Our parents slowly began making an effort to include my husband more fully in family events, though it was clear they were doing it more to appease my brother than out of genuine acceptance. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As for my relationship with my brother, it remained complicated. I was glad he was making changes, but I couldn't forget that it had taken the complete destruction of his personal and professional life to motivate him to treat me with basic respect. The revenge I'd planned had worked better than I'd ever imagined, but the victory felt bittersweet. Sometimes I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I'd been too calculating in my response to his rejection. But then I remembered sitting at home on his graduation day, excluded from my own family celebration because of who I loved, and I felt justified in my actions. My brother had made choices that revealed his true character. I'd simply ensured that those choices had consequences beyond just hurting my feelings. In the end, we both got what we deserved. He learned that bigotry comes with a price, and I learned that sometimes the best way to change someone's mind is to show them what they stand to lose. The family drama had torn us apart and forced us back together, but we were different people now. Whether we could build something genuine from the wreckage remained to be seen. At least now we were starting from a place of honesty rather than pretending everything was fine while fundamental disrespect festered beneath the surface. The graduation invitation that had started it all was still tucked away in my desk drawer, a reminder of how quickly family bonds can fracture and how much work it takes to rebuild them properly. My brother had his law degree, but I taught him the most important lesson of his legal education. Actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences are exactly what someone deserves.